In a single night, Iran carried out a precision strike campaign that wiped out Israel's entire forward-deployed armored formations before even a single tank crew could mount an effective response. In more than 30 years of studying mechanized warfare, I've never witnessed such a total operational collapse of a ground force without direct combat engagement. This was not a battle. It was the systematic annihilation of Israel's armored capability, executed from the air with weapons purpose-built to eliminate tanks, leaving no warning and no opportunity to react. The true gravity of this catastrophe lies not only in the sheer scale of destruction, but in what it signifies. Israel's doctrine for ground warfare has been built entirely on armored supremacy. The Merava 4 is far more than a tank. It embodies a military philosophy that relies on the belief that Israeli armor can dominate any land engagement through superior protection, firepower, and crew skill. Iran demonstrated that this assumption is now obsolete. When an entire armored force is neutralized before firing a single shot, doctrine becomes meaningless. And when doctrine collapses, an army can no longer fight the war it trained for. The question now is, how did Iran manage to locate and destroy 500 dispersed, fortified, and heavily defended tanks in one coordinated strike? What weapon system can breach a Merava 4 from above, on the only angle where its armor is vulnerable, with enough precision to achieve unprecedented kill rates? The annihilation of Israel's operational ground power in one night marks a turning point. To understand the magnitude, consider what Israel's armored core looked like before the strike. This was not a token garrison. It was the backbone of IDF ground combat power, the 188th Armored Brigade, the 7th Armored Brigade, and the 401st Armored Brigade, units whose combat lineages stretch back to Israel's founding battles. These brigades were equipped almost entirely with Merava 4 main battle tanks, among the most heavily protected in the world, designed to keep crews alive under intense fire in Gaza, Lebanon, and the Golan Heights. Each of the 500 Merava thieves carried a 4-person crew, a 120mm smoothbore cannon, advanced fire control systems, and the Trophy Active Protection System, intended to intercept incoming anti-tank threats before reaching the vehicle. Each vehicle was positioned in fortified defensive lines, hardened against artillery, dispersed to reduce mass casualties, and supported by integrated air defense. All of it vanished in a single night. The operation began at 2:47 a.m. local time. The weapons used were neither ballistic missiles, nor cruise missiles, nor artillery. They were loitering munitions, variants of the Iranian Shahed 136, modified with tandem charge warheads and millimeter-wave radar seekers optimized to detect and strike armored vehicles. The concept was deceptively simple. Saturate the target zone with enough autonomous seekers so that every tank was threatened by multiple weapons simultaneously. Each munition was programmed to autonomously locate, identify, and attack targets, launch enough to overwhelm air defenses, and execute the mission within a compressed window, leaving no chance for meaningful dispersal or protective measures. Based on post-strike imagery and operational timelines, roughly 1,200 loitering munitions targeted 500 tank positions, a ratio of about 2.4 weapons per vehicle. Redundancy was intentional, ensuring that even if half were intercepted, the remainder would guarantee coverage. In reality, interception rates appear well below 50%. Trophy systems, designed to counter conventional anti-tank missiles with predictable trajectories, proved largely ineffective against slow-moving drones descending from directly overhead. Targeting was surgical. The munitions focused on engine decks and turret roofs, the Merava IFE's only thinner armor sections, using tandem charge warheads designed to defeat reactive armor and penetrate the main armor beneath. Once breached, the secondary effects inside the crew compartment were devastating. Ammunition cook-offs, fuel ignition, total crew casualties, and vehicle destruction. By 4:15 a.m., roughly 90 minutes after initiation, the operational assessment was clear. The 188th Brigade's tank strength fell from 120 to fewer than 15 vehicles. The 7th Brigade dropped from 95 to single digits. The 401st Brigade was effectively neutralized. Across all affected units, Israel lost approximately 470 main battle tanks in one night. More armored vehicles than in the entire 1973 Yom Kippur War, the costliest armored engagement in Israeli history. Financially, the replacement value of $4 billion is substantial, yet the operational loss eclipses monetary considerations. Tanks cannot be replaced overnight. Production capacity does not exist to replenish 500 vehicles rapidly. Even with immediate funding, new tanks would arrive over years, not months. Crew losses worsen the dilemma. Even if vehicles were ready tomorrow, trained crews to operate them in 3 brigades worth formations simply do not exist. Training a tank crew to operational proficiency requires 8 to 12 months in peacetime conditions, far longer under combat pressure. Israel awoke to an obliteration of its ground combat capability, not a setback. This shift fundamentally changes the trajectory of the conflict. The reason for this collapse lies in a technological evolution that Western armor doctrine has been slow to accept and slower to counter. The era of the main battle tank as the dominant ground force is ending, not because tanks are universally obsolete, but because the cost-exchange ratio has decisively shifted in favor of attackers wielding modern precision anti-armor weapons. Loitering munitions, sometimes called suicide drones, are more sophisticated than the term suggests, and represent a paradigm shift in how armored units can be engaged and destroyed. Unlike conventional anti-tank missiles, which must be fired from a fixed, known location and travel along a predictable ballistic or guided trajectory that can be tracked and intercepted, loitering munitions operate entirely differently. They can be deployed from standoff positions, conduct erratic search patterns over target zones, and autonomously identify and categorize threats using onboard sensors before executing a terminal strike tailored to the specific target. All of this occurs without requiring constant human input. Iran's Shahed. A 136 anti-armor variant is engineered with several features that made this strike feasible. Its millimeter-wave radar seeker can differentiate tanks from other large metal objects, such as trucks, earth movers, or civilian vehicles, by analyzing radar signature profiles. The tandem charge warhead is optimized for top attacks, diving at shallow angles to strike the less fortified horizontal surfaces of a tank rather than the reinforced frontal or side armor. GPS is unnecessary, as the guidance relies on inertial navigation and terrain following to reach the target zone, while autonomous seeker-based guidance during the final phase renders the system resistant to jamming. What is most alarming is not a single technical specification, but the multiplied operational effect when these munitions are used in volume. One loitering drone presents a manageable threat. A vigilant crew with an active protection system has a fair chance of survival. Yet, when 50 loitering munitions converge on the same square kilometer simultaneously, defending becomes virtually impossible. Intercepting every incoming threat is unfeasible. Evasion is not an option. Armor cannot be modified to counter the top attack, because every tank's design must accept weaker horizontal surfaces to remain mobile. The economic balance shifts the problem from tactical to structural. The Shahed 136 anti-armor variant costs roughly $30,000 to $50,000 to manufacture at scale. In contrast, an $8 million Morava 4 can be reliably destroyed by one or two drones priced around $40,000 each. From the attacker's perspective, the economic sustainability is overwhelming. Iran can mass-produce loitering munitions far beyond Israel's tank inventory, exhausting the latter's assets long before Iran's production limits are reached. The self-reliance dimension completes the strategic picture. Every Shahed 136 component is produced entirely within Iran's domestic defense industry. The airframe is made from composites in Iranian facilities. The engine is a small piston type, fabricated in hundreds by Iranian workshops. The warhead employs conventional explosives with shaped charge liners perfected over decades. The seeker integrates commercially available radar components, free from meaningful export restrictions. No external supply chain exists for sanctions to disrupt. No American or European parts can be leveraged as pressure points. By contrast, Israel's Morava 4, though domestically produced, relies on critical subsystems such as fire control computers, thermal sights, and certain composite armor elements incorporating American or European technology subject to export licenses and end-use controls. More importantly, Israel lacks the industrial capacity to replace losses at the scale just suffered. Before this strike, the annual production rate of Morava 4s was approximately 50 vehicles, meaning a decade would be required to rebuild what was destroyed in a single night. The operational verdict is stark. When advanced armor faces precision loitering munitions at scale, the munitions prevail, not because the tanks are poorly designed, but because the attacker enjoys decisive tactical and economic advantages. These advantages are structural, not temporary. The era of armor dominance, which shaped ground warfare from 1918 through the early 21st century, has effectively ended in conflicts where both sides possess modern precision weapons. Having served in theaters where American armor doctrine was actively developed, I recognize the implications. What Israel's tank force experienced represents the Pentagon's nightmare scenario, a situation acknowledged in planning documents but never truly prepared for operationally. The U.S. military fields the largest and most capable armored formations in the world. The M1A2 SCP V3, Abrams' main battle tank, is arguably the most advanced heavy armor platform in service today. Yet the fundamental vulnerability that doomed the Morava IF, insufficient roof armor against top attack precision weapons, is shared by the Abrams, German Leopard 2, British Challenger 2, and virtually every Western main battle tank. The physics of armor impose unavoidable constraints. Front and side protection can be extreme, but equal protection on top and bottom renders the vehicle immobile. Every tank design compromises with thinner horizontal armor, relying on tactics, dispersion, and air defense to counter overhead threats. This compromise has now failed catastrophically in the most operationally visible way possible. Washington remains silent because no immediate solution exists. Active protection systems, including Trophy and Iron Fist, as well as various hard kill and soft kill interceptors, are calibrated against anti-tank missiles traveling hundreds of meters per second. They are not optimized for small drones moving at 70 knots from overhead, especially when deployed in swarms exceeding system capacities. A theoretical technical solution exists, a close-in weapon system capable of automatic target acquisition, rapid traverse, and high rates of fire to engage dozens of small aerial targets per minute. But no such system is currently deployable on any American armored vehicle. The strategic consequences extend beyond immediate tactical losses. If a Marava I-4, designed with survivability as the absolute priority and incorporating 50 years of Israeli armored combat experience, can be neutralized by relatively simple loitering munitions at this scale, then every American armored formation deployed in Europe, Korea, and the Middle East faces the same threat. The 1st Armored Division in Poland, the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea, and armored brigade combat teams rotating through the Middle East all operate vehicles with the identical fundamental vulnerability that just devastated Israel's tank corps. I understand how Washington responds in these scenarios. The instinctive institutional reflex is to pursue technical solutions, accelerate development of next-generation active protection systems, enhance armor packages, and update doctrine for dispersal and hardening. But technical fixes require time, a resource adversaries like Iran intentionally deny. By the moment American defense industry manages to develop, test, and deploy an effective counter to large-scale loitering munition threats, Iran and its allies will likely have advanced to the next iteration. The cycle of action and reaction in military technology has shifted decisively in favor of the attacker because offensive solutions are cheaper, faster to design, and easier to produce in bulk than the defender's countermeasures. Washington's silence reflects not apathy, but profound strategic uncertainty. The operational framework that has guided American ground combat for 3 generations, the assumption that properly supported heavy armor can dominate any land engagement, has been fundamentally invalidated in a way no political or media spin can hide. The institution does not yet have a replacement model. What stands out in comparing Iran's operational execution with Israel's vulnerability is less the technology itself than what it reveals about 2 entirely different approaches to national defense. Israel's armored core was the culmination of massive investment, financial, industrial, and human. The Marava program spanned decades of development, consuming billions of dollars. Technically, it was impressive, yet its foundation rested on assumptions that held only under specific external conditions. The assumption that American resupply would always be reliable, that technological superiority would offset numeric inferiority, that Israel's operational edge, superior training, equipment, and doctrine would mitigate vulnerabilities in specific systems. These assumptions were systematically dismantled by an adversary operating under entirely different premises. Iran did not attempt to match the Merkava tank for tank. Instead, it created an asymmetric capability explicitly designed to exploit the single vulnerability heavy armor cannot eliminate. Rather than building a better tank, Iran built a weapon that rendered the tank irrelevant. The development cycle was shorter, production costs lower, and the operational outcome decisive. The IRGC soldiers who planned and executed the strike operated under a doctrine shaped by decades of constrained resources against foes with superior conventional capabilities. When direct symmetrical engagement is impossible, asymmetry is used to turn the opponent's strength into weakness. That approach demands creativity, discipline, and a willingness to accept operational risk for strategic gain. It yielded a campaign that annihilated a force Israel had spent 50 years assembling. The crews of the destroyed Marava I-4s were experienced professionals, using sophisticated equipment in fortified positions with integrated air defense. They perished not due to training or performance failures, but because the operational environment had changed beneath them in ways their doctrine and equipment were never designed to manage. This is not a critique of the soldiers. It is an observation about the limits of borrowed power and the risks of building military capability on assumptions reliant on external support, assumptions that opponents have carefully studied and learned to defeat. We are witnessing a genuine inflection point in ground warfare. This moment may only be recognized in hindsight, yet its operational consequences are already reshaping how serious militaries approach armored forces. Every major power maintaining heavy armor, the United States, Russia, China, India, and NATO members, is urgently reassessing what Israel's tank destruction implies for their doctrines. The vulnerability that destroyed the Marava I-4 exists across every main battle tank currently in service. Loitering munition technology is not unique to Iran. Comparable systems are operational or in development in Russia, China, Turkey, and several other nations. The operational methodology, overwhelming precision, strike density against dispersed, hardened targets, can be replicated by any military with sufficient planning and production capacity. The economic implications will resonate strongly in capitals maintaining costly armored forces. The United States Army fields roughly 2,500 Abrams tanks in active service, each representing around $10 million in sustainment and modernization costs. That amounts to a $25 billion asset base now proven vulnerable to weapons costing only a fraction of that sum. The political feasibility of sustaining such forces when opponents can annihilate them with easily produced low-cost weapons becomes a serious concern. For nations relying on imported Western armor, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Poland, Taiwan, the demonstration that advanced tanks can be destroyed at scale by relatively simple precision systems will accelerate strategic moves toward indigenous production or alternative approaches that do not depend on heavy armor survivability. Gulf states in particular are likely to incorporate these lessons into procurement decisions over the coming years. This is not the death of armored warfare. Tanks retain operational value in specific contexts and will remain relevant. However, the era of the tank as the decisive element of ground combat, the formation whose firepower, protection, and mobility determined the outcome of campaigns, has ended. What follows is unclear, but the operational framework guiding ground combat since World War II has confronted a technological development it cannot adapt to without fundamental restructuring. 500 tanks, $4 billion, 50 years of doctrine, all obliterated in 6 hours by an adversary who spent less on the weapons than Israel invested in a single brigade's vehicles. In my career, I have witnessed many military technologies rendered obsolete, but never so abruptly or completely. The pressing question is no longer whether Israel can replace what was lost, it is whether replacing it is meaningful. Does rebuilding an armored force make operational sense in an environment where it can be destroyed before firing a single round by an adversary capable of limitless production of the same weapons? My assessment is that it does not. If correct, the IDF faces not merely a procurement issue, but a doctrinal crisis that demands rethinking the entire approach to land warfare. What happens next will depend on whether Israel's leadership can grasp this reality in time to adapt, or whether they attempt to reconstruct what was destroyed and repeat the same costly lesson. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.